Why is US strong? Besides its army and economic power, it also has ability to mediate international conflicts. Let's get back to 1905 when the Treaty of Portsmouth was concluded after harsh negotiations between Japan and Russia. The US President Theodore Roosevelt played a pivotal role. In 19th century, Russia started looking at the East as the nation had no way to be the leading power in Europe. China, Korean Peninsula, and Manchuria were fertile areas to Russia. Meanwhile, Japan was also trying to move to such areas. So it was inevitable to avoid armed conflicts between the two nations. In February 1904, Japanese army defeated Russian troops in Manchuria. The world thought, wasn't that a powerful giant? I guess not. Russia decided to fight more. We have Trans-Siberian Railway, so more soldiers can join. Japan, on the other hand, was confident of its victory. At the early 1905, the casualty figure was already over 150,000, and no one was sure when the war will end. The world was worried about the war. Why? If one of the two nations becomes alliance with Europe countries, then the war would spread over the whole world. The US President Theodore Roosevelt decided to stop the war, but he had troubles. One was Russia. The huge country already knew that the United States would want to alleviate tensions and stop the war. Another trouble was John Hay, the Secretary of State. The gentleman was sick in bed. But Roosevelt decided to take steps by himself. Please don't fight. Peace, please. Russia turned its back. Japan was polite, but it had no intention to stop fighting. Roosevelt said to Japan, even you keep fighting and win the battles, you'd lose so much and gain just little. Also, he said to Russia, hey, even if you defeat Japan, you can hardly expect to get back what you have lost so far. On May 27, 1905, fleets of both sides crashed near Tsushima. For just 1 minute, around 2,000 shots were fired and the Russian Navy was defeated. 22 battleships of Russia were sunk to the bottom of the sea. Roosevelt said to Japan, now you need to stop the war as a winner. The world is watching you. The US president had a headache. I can't trust the Russian ambassador to the US. So he told US ambassador to Russia to contact the Russian emperor. In fact, the ambassador was a friend of Roosevelt since they were students of Harvard University. The US ambassador Mayer visited the Russian palace in summer. Russia and Japan need to stop the war as millions would die otherwise. The emperor worried, what if the Russian people know that Japan defeated my army? It took around 60 days to determine where to talk. Russia wanted Paris because France is my friend. Japan, on the other hand, wanted Chufu in China as the nation is my fellow. Roosevelt suggested Hague in Netherlands, but both Russia and Japan disagreed. Japan and Russia suggested Washington, D.C. in the United States. Roosevelt thought people in the city would love to speak and the weather is not favorable. So he was looking for a place with good weather, safety, and peaceful environment. Portsmouth in New Hampshire was selected as it was properly isolated and was a calm village. Western Union set a communication channel for the talk. 200 people worked and built a place for the negotiation. A huge conference room was in the center, and a suite room was set on each side with 3 smaller rooms. Meanwhile, governments of Japan and Russia were struggling to designate the representatives for the talk. As the 2 countries were at war, no politician wanted to be involved in the delegation. Let's see the chief delegate of Russia, Sergei Vite. On July 13, 1905, he told his friend, "Oh, I can hardly expect the talk would end in peace." He was born in 1849 and became the finance minister. As he investigated Rasputin, the empress hated Vite. But he was a workaholic and upright, so Russia needed him. He was the person who planned and built the Trans-Siberian Railway. For 11 years, he worked well as the finance minister in Russia. So going to the United States as the chief delegate was risky for him. He was tall and looked like a soldier. Let's see the chief delegate of the other side, Japan. No politicians wanted to be involved in the talk. Why? It was politically risky. Jutato Komura was 48 years old and had work experience as a diplomat in Korea, China, Russia, and in the United States. Also, he was grown up in the US and studied at Harvard University with the US President Theodore Roosevelt. Russia wanted armistice, whereas Japan did not that much. Why? Japan was confident of its victory, but it needed to give some time for its soldiers to rest. So the Japanese army stopped marching. On July 8, 1905, the Japanese representatives began their voyage to the United States. The chief of delegation was worried. The people might feel angry when we come back. Meanwhile, the Russian chief delegate got a message from his emperor. "I don't expect that much about the negotiation in Portsmouth. If Japan demands too much, then Russia would fight again." On August 8, 1905, delegations arrived in Portsmouth. If you are curious about what we have talked about in Portsmouth, please click the subscribe button. On August 10th, 2 days after they arrived, chief delegates of Russia and Japan had their first meeting. There was silence for a while, and Komura picked documents on which demands were written. "For world peace and humanity, we want to stop the war." Vite said, "Agreed, only if Japan asks what are reasonable. If unreasonable, the relationship will be worse. Let me tell you the mission I got before I come to Portsmouth. Category A, must accomplish. Japan conquers the Korean Peninsula. Withdraw Russian troops from Manchuria. Category B, accomplish if possible. Japanese fishery rights in Russian adjacent seas. Turn over Sakhalin Island to Japan. Compensation, and so on. Category C, flexible issues. Permanent reduction of the Russian Navy in the Pacific Ocean, and so on. But I thought the guideline was weak, so I made some critical revisions. Turn over Sakhalin Island to Japan, and compensation, move to category A, must accomplish. What? That's too much? You may have no way but to accept what Japan demands. I don't think so. Japan is also suffering from continuous battles. Brinkmanship would be a good way. In the next video, we'll see the result of the talk.